Greetings, Andy here again, and in this video I'm starting my monthly roundup of new releases I bought during the previous month. So here we are, beginning of October, and I'm looking at 8 in total new releases during September. So 8's too many to do in one go, so I'm splitting them. I'll do 4 now and then 4 next week, and I sort of, they're in little groups in a way. So I've got 2 albums by female solo artists who have partners who involved in their record, which are much better known, I think. I'm going to do 1 in each. And then I've got 4 bands, long established bands or artists who have had a comeback album last month. So I'm going to do two today and then 2 next week. And then I've got 2 albums by US bands who are each fronted by very strong female lyricists and singers. And again, I'm going to do 1 in each. So no, just for balance, and I'm starting there with one of those, and it is Big Thief and the new album Double Infinity. So I'm sort of, and it's like the back and the front are exactly the same. I'm really new to Big Thief after really discovering them through Adrienne Lenker's solo album, Bright Future, which she released last year, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. And I just really like her voice. It's sort of, and it's unusual for me to be drawn to lyrics, but somehow Adrienne or Adrienne's lyrics really do that for me. And it's sort of, she delivers them in this sort of beguiling Americana drawl, really. But, her vocal style, I think, is as far towards Americana or country folk as this record goes. To me, this is much more sort of indie rock, but it's really sort of folk rock. And I gather, I don't know Big Thief's earlier work, though I have streamed, I don't own any, but I've streamed a few songs. I think this is a progression from that sort of country folk of their previous ones. And this album has had mixed reviews as a result, but I really love it. It sort of really works for me. I find musically it's both interesting and enjoyable. So every track draws you in. And I read, not knowing them, I've sort of read quite a few reviews there, and I read a review here which I quite like, and it says, the album marks a shift towards psychedelic and percussive textures with ambient influences and jam-like structures. Now, maybe a bit pretentious, but actually that's quite a good view. So apparently their long-term bassist, who was called, I need to check my notes because I don't really know all these people, Max Oliarchik, left and wasn't replaced. So they've sort of coalesced into a trio now with Adrienne Lenker on vocals, obviously, Buck Meek on guitar, who's long-term guitarist, and obviously heavily involved in the writing, even though Adrienne is really the lyricist, and then James Krivchenia on drums. Now they recorded this album. It's a single album with how many tracks are there? 9, I think. In the Power Station studio, in which I have sort of vaguely heard of, but apparently it goes back years, and there's been some amazing albums recorded there. And it's in New York, and they recorded this over 3 weeks, the trio, but with a sort of revolving cast of guest musicians working with them on it, including providing some singing, which I'll come to in a bit. Lyrically, the theme of this, and as I say, Adrienne Lenker's sort of lyrics do draw me in a little bit. I'm usually more music than lyrics, and I quite often just don't listen to the lyrics. But these I do, and it's sort of theme going through the album around aging and beauty. and of course there's love thrown in, but around sort of like beauty not necessarily fading with age. And the opening track, called Incomprehensible, she sings this. I find this quite amusing, being 68. She sings about turning 33, which doesn't seem any age to me, and silver hair falling on her shoulders. But you know, that is young to start going grey, I would say. To me, the standout track is called Grandmother, and here she addresses her grandmother and her lover together, separately but together, and asks for patience and solace. And then she sort of carries on singing about turning it all into rock and roll, and that's the sort of a refrain going through it. And there's one of the musicians who supported on this, I looked up, he's called Larage. He's an American musician, pianist, and sort of avant-garde stuff, and he's sort of singing some background behind her, but it's much more than backing vocals. It's a really lovely track, and it's got the inner sleeve has got the sort of lyrics on there, which is handy with this. It's a really nice record. As I say, it's 9, and this one was on green vinyl. And so we move on and to Suede and their album Antidepressants. So I'm going to put this down in a minute because it appears to be falling apart even. But the album doesn't have a cover. It's sort of got some. The cardboard inner sleeve is really a sort of like to give it some support, as is this piece of cardboard, because the actual cover is a giant poster, which is like really quite weird, and given that I'm never going to put this on my wall, is in my opinion quite unnecessary, because you can't really sort of, you know, it's flopping, so I'm going to put that down because it's just too hard to deal with. So this is Suede's 10th studio album, and it's 32 years after their first. And here we are in 2025, and Britpop is having a bit of a revival. So Blur have been touring recently, and obviously Oasis have been on their world tour. But you know, even though you might think back to Suede as being, you know, one of the very first Britpop bands, this is far from Britpop. This isn't remotely Britpop. It's far more brash and muscular in its music. Brett Anderson, I read the key members here have have gone on various interviews to describe it. So Brett Anderson described it as their post-punk album, and there's a recurring theme to that. The bassist, Matt Osman, said, I'm reading this is a widescreen, I nearly said windscreen there. This is a widescreen and ambitious record. It's a big stage record, and it's taking up a gear, and I think that's pretty good. It is. I mean, this is one of their best albums they've ever released, I think. The guitarist Richard Oakes said that his earliest influences, including Wire, The Fall, and John McGough of Susie and the Banshees, found a way in here that they hadn't with their early records. So, and a lot of reviews concur about this. So I read one, The Independent, saying that the album marks a shift towards a more gothic post-punk aesthetic, and that goth bit is relevant. The opening track, Disintegrate, features a really thudding refrain and really explosive instrumentation. It gets the album really going, and the title track is very good as well. Antidepressants, obviously, but somehow it blends some psychedelia into that sort of goth and post-punk vibe, and it is sung from the perspective of a man grappling with death, existentialism, and anxiety, and you know, talking about the idea of medication as a cure-all. Two of the strongest tracks are really sweeping ballads. Well, my favourite is Somewhere Behind an Atom and a Star, which is really it's quite a beautiful track, but it's not a sort of like it's not an ambient one. It's a sweeping ballad, and also June Rain is quite nice. I think the standout, it's not necessarily my favourite track on the album, but the standout is Broken Music for Broken People, which I think is really an epic stadium rocker, really. I'm pulling this out. So the album is white on white, and the second side, it actually, which starts off with Broken Music for Broken People, actually has that as the label. So yeah, as I say, it's 11 tracks on white vinyl with a ridiculous poster cover. And so to my third album today is another comeback, this time from an artist who has been going for longer than any of these, and that's Robert Plant. And the album he's just released is Saving Grace with Susie Dean, and I'll come back to her in a minute. So Saving Grace are actually the name of a band, the band he's worked with in this, and he did tour with them back in I don't know, pre-COVID time, and they started working on this in 2019, and they've sort of produced the album over all those years, really sort of with intermittent sessions. And this is a real blend of blues and folk, and it reminds me a lot. Let me pull these up. It reminds me a lot of his 2010 album Band of Joy, which is also covers. So I should have said this is essentially a covers and traditional sort of folk and blues songs, as was his album Band of Joy, which interestingly there's another link there, because whilst the name of this Saving Grace is the name of a band who he's working with, Band of Joy was also the name of his band. It was the band he was in before Led Zeppelin. And there's a little bit, I'd say, you know, in terms of influence in here, whilst it mostly goes back to that, it also goes back a little bit to his album, well, the first of his albums with Mrs. Declan McManus, aka Alison Krauss, Raising Sand, and you know, somewhere it sits with these. So let me put that down. It's a real mix of sort of Americana, but maybe more European folk than American folk, as was on Raising Sand. And he's joined on vocals here with Susie, I don't know, is it Dean or Diane? And their singing is quite beautiful in here. It intertwines, the two of them singing together, sort of entwines together quite seamlessly. She's not there to do backing singers, and he gives her plenty of space, sort of front and centre. And there's some beautiful harmonies on here between the two of them. And his voice is as strong as ever. Let me just let me notes. Yeah, so as I say, there's a lot of covers on here. One is Blind Willie Johnson's song Soul of Man, which features some sort of nice gospel style vocals and a really prominent banjo, which you know, picking banjo, which is a recurring feature through the album, and Plant plays harmonica on it as well. And A Beautiful Day Today is a Moby Grape cover. It's rather beautiful with some fabulous vocal harmonies. And there's another which I think is interesting. We put that down. Another connection back to here is this album, Lowe's The Great Destroyer, because on here he had two covers from this album, which was Silver Rider and Monkey, and then on here he has another cover from here, which is the penultimate track, Everybody's Song. So he clearly likes this album, as do I. It's brilliant. And the final track is, where are we? Gospel Plough, which is a traditional sort of African-American spiritual folk song. And it ends with a field recording of Birdsong, which apparently was recorded during lockdown. This is an absolutely superb album, and it's one that is teaching me to love the banjo, an instrument that I've never really liked much, but it works so well on here. And there are 10 tracks, and it's on black vinyl. And the last album, so this is one of the female solo artists who have a sort of probably better known other half. And this album is by Lucrecia Dalt, D-A-L-T, and it's called A Danger to Ourselves. Now, Lucrecia Dalt is a Colombian singer, and I sort of discovered her with a previous album, which was called in Spanish sort of punctuation, which came out in 2022, and I really liked it. So I actually pre-ordered this and discovered that one David Sylvian of Japan and Solo Flame back in the day is all over this album in the background mostly, but and it turns out that Sylvian is her partner. No, he's my sort of age. He's about 20 years older than she is. So anyway, he looks a lot better than I do for our age. So there you go. So they apparently, excuse me. They apparently live in New Mexico and have a home studio where they recorded this. It was jointly produced by Lucrecia Dalt and Sylvian, but Sylvian did all the mixing, and he's clearly influential in the not the lyrics. She's the lyricist and the singer, but he's clearly quite influential in the style of music. It's quite ambient in parts. And I saw this as some, reading reviews and things. I read it, a comment which described, this is really pretentious, described it like a psychological thriller wrapped in ambient poetry. So there you go. A better description I read was minimalist ambient textures, and I think that's where the Sylvian influence comes in, layered with eerie electronics and spectral percussion and flickering jazz licks. Now, the lyrics, there's a mix of English singing but mostly Spanish, and there's a couple of guest vocalists in there as well who are also singing in Spanish. The only Spanish I can do is a menu, so I haven't got a clue what they're singing about, but she has a lovely beguiling voice, and I read in one of the reviews that the album is inspired by the emotional turbulence of a new relationship. So I presume the Sylvian one isn't that new, and it blends tenderness with menace and cinematic surrealism. I just listening to it, I sort of get that. Let me read. I've kept it in here because this is one where the hype sticker description is actually quite good. So I'll read it out quickly. Lucrecia Dalt's A Danger to Ourselves is a fearless reflection on the unfiltered complexities of human connection, following up her breakthrough 2022 album, I. A Danger to Herself unravels like a deeply personal conversation. Dalt's voice is foregrounded and formidable, which is true, supported by a lush array of acoustic orchestration and processing. Collage percussive patterns and an esteemed cast of collaborators, including David Sylvian, who co-produced the album with Dalt, blah 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 blah. So yeah, it is all of those things. So the opening track, which is called what's it called? I've forgotten. Cosa Rara. Actually features David Sylvian. It's quite weird because she's singing Spanish, and then there comes a point where Sylvian comes in with a sort of spoken word one, and it doesn't sound anything like him. He's really sort of almost growling, gruff sort of lyrics. I'm not sure it actually adds anything to it, though. Undoubtedly, the sort of production and the musical influence does. And then there's one, I've got to read these because they're all in Spanish. Acefale, I think it is, Acephle. To me, has a feel, and this isn't anything I've read, this is just, to me, it has a sort of feel of Gotan Project about it. And it's not remotely tango, it doesn't sound Argentinian, but it's got that sort of sensual Latin rhythm that Gotan Project has, and sort of one of the closing, the penultimate track on side A, is called Hasta el Final, until the end. I looked it up. I should have known that because of Hasta la Vista, till we meet again or see each other. And that's a slow burning vocal, and it's set to orchestration and a lovely acoustic bass. I really like that one. I do think this is a step up on the previous album, and as I say, it's definitely got some influence from David Sylvian, and it's because the tracks are quite short. There's 13 in total, and it's just on black vinyl. And I notice that all 4 of these are just single LPs. So I'm going to do another 4 next time. Similar balance mix, equally some good ones, and there's one which I'm less enamoured with, but we'll go through that. So, but altogether, it's been a magnificent pick, and there's a tremendous double album in there from a sort of comeback from a band that I've enjoyed for many years. So, thanks for watching. Cheers.